Let's go. Evening, if you're watching us live, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're catching Crossy's Corner from. I'm Martin Cross, and with me is Cambridge University's Boat Club president. I'm just gonna turn that off. I just had two video streams running there. Sorry to the 5 people that have tuned in. I'm Martin Cross, and I didn't get to say this is Seb Benzecry, Cambridge University Boat Club president. Hi, Seb.
Hi, Martin. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's brilliant that you're on, and I really look forward to talking with you. Maybe we can start by just you filling us in how your day's been today.
It's been pretty good. We just did some training in the morning, bit of a longer ergo, did some weights as well. And I had a couple of meetings about social media stuff for the club, and had a supervision with my supervisor. And yeah, it's been pretty standard day. Getting quite cold, so that's not very welcome, but you know.
Yeah,
is what it is.
Now you came down to the Tideway for the Four's Head, but you couldn't race because it was cancelled. So were you on the Tideway anyway?
Yeah, we were. I mean, the purpose of the trip was to race at Four's Head. So it was frustrating for us to come down and have everything set up and to be told that we couldn't race. I mean, we still got quite a lot out of it, and it's always great just to be able to go down and be on the Tideway. It's always a fantastic experience for us. But it was definitely frustrating not to be able to actually do the race and sort of put into practice what we've been working towards over this block of training in the Fours.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you in a little bit to talk us through, those crews and who might be around and how the squad is looking. One thing I just assumed that both universities, Oxford and Cambridge, would be entered in the Four's Head, but I see Oxford didn't have entries in the Four's Head.
Yeah, it's an odd one. That I don't really know why they chose not to enter this year. I think it's a bit of a shame. It would have been great to have that kind of early season match up with them. Obviously, it didn't matter in the end, but I mean, it's completely up to them how they choose to run their season. And for us, we always get a huge amount of value out of the Four's Head just because it's such a great opportunity to have a full race over the boat race course, albeit in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And it's also just a great opportunity to have boats within the squad match up against each other. This time of year, selection is very much a kind of open thing. And guys are just really, really internally competitive right now, and giving them an opportunity to race each other in a kind of official setting is always exciting, and it always brings out another level, I think, for the racing. But yeah,
when do people start to get an idea of whether they're going to be in the blue boat or not?
It really changes depending on the squad, and some years it'll be really right down to the end of February, start of March. There'll be selection all the way up until then, and guys will be on the border between Goldie and the blue boat, and maybe the spares and Goldie, and those decisions can happen quite late and are very difficult if there are just a number of guys who are of a very similar standard. Sometimes things are much clearer earlier on, and the group just kind of generally sort of separates itself out a little bit. But there's generally always a selection battle happening, fairly late on into the season, well past our camp in January. It just sort of depends how many people are involved in that. And some years, like this year, we just have really sort of flat squads in terms of the level. So you have a number of people operating at a kind of similar level, and it could really go either way between several people. So yeah, that's always difficult and can be uncomfortable, but ultimately pushes our standard on hugely. And I think what's exciting this year is that we have a squad where everyone's at a pretty high level, but there are a lot of guys sort of in the mix, I guess, and it's really made all of us pick up our individual standards a lot, and it's really driving the squad on, I think.
Yeah, I want to talk about your past boat race history, but I think one question that popped into my mind there was it was obviously the 2022 blue boat was a tough choice, and you had to row in Goldie that year. When did you know that you were in Goldie and not in the blue boat? How long did that selection battle go on for?
I think so. I was kind of in a selection battle with the guy who ultimately ended up in the bow seat of that boat, Luca.
Yeah.
Yeah, and both me and him spent time in that blue boat. I did a fixture against Leander in the blue boat, then moved into Goldie after that. So I guess it would have been sort of start of February.
Yeah.
But what it came down to then was Luca was just really on fire, absolutely pulling out some incredible performances. And in the end, Rob was made the right decision, which was to be like, Luca is just in a much better position right now.
Yeah.
And that was, it's always difficult to be on the wrong side of those things, but at the time I was, completely accepted it. And ultimately what you want is to have the fastest boats and to have the fastest squad. That's what matters most. And so, yeah, but I guess that happened in February time, probably early February. Yeah.
And do you get a sense of so I guess the question I want to ask, which might be an unfair question, is how secure or not do you think your place might be in the 2024 blue boat?
Well, I mean, no one has a secure place. I think that's
Yeah.
that's kind of the important thing. I think everyone comes in and needs to produce performances over the course of the year that will ultimately end up in them being selected. And I think this year the standard is really, really high across the board. And we have, probably 8 bow siders and 8 stroke siders who could be in the blue boat.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I definitely don't feel like there's just a place waiting for me in the blue boat. It would be very much that I would have to, earn that place and win selection battles to be there, which is how it should be, and it's how we as a squad, get to the place we need to be come race day.
Yeah. We talked before we went live, and I was saying I don't think the squads are actually up on the website yet, and so I was trying to find out who you're rowing with this year, but maybe hopefully that's going to happen soon. But maybe you can talk us through, I don't know, the guys that would have raced the Force Head, or the characters in the squad, the CUB squad.
Yeah. So it's a great squad this year. It's really a lot of characters. We have a lot of returners. So we have 7 of the 9 blue boat rowers from last year. We only lost Ollie, and I guess also we lost Jasper. 6 of the 9. So I still live with Jasper. So
yeah.
It feels like he's still very much a part of things. He's just not actually coxing with us this year. But we lost Ollie Parrish and Nick Mayhew, but we have the rest of the rowers that were in the blue boat. We have a few guys from Goldie, Sean, who stroked it, Luke Beaver, who sat at 7, Tom Marsh, who was at 3, Orlando Morley, Cam McKenzie. I think that's it. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone.
Yeah.
But they're all stepping up massively. Younger guys, but very much a huge part of the team this year, and just really stepping on hugely in terms of their performances. And then from outside, we have A couple of guys from Harvard come in. Ed Bracey, who coxed the Harvard varsity, really fantastic cox. Kenny Copeland, who was great rower at Harvard, really absolutely fantastic rower here, super powerful and just a wonderful, wonderful dude. We have a guy from Cal, Dane, Stanford guy who actually graduated in 2020. So he was the same class as a guy that I rode in from Stanford in the 2021 boat, Drew Taylor, who stroked the 2021 blue boat, and they were really close at Stanford. So it's brilliant to have him on the team now. And just a really great mix of guys. A lot of guys come up from college. We have a very strong set of college rowers this year who are making the step up to the university team. So we have about 3 plus 8s worth of guys, 3 8s and some guys beyond that as well. It's a big team, but it's really just an incredibly positive and motivated group of people. And it's been, a real pleasure to work with them so far this year.
How does Rob and you manage a squad like that at this time? I mean, are you all in the ergo room together for a session? Is that how it works, or you're all on the water in 3 8s together?
Yeah, and it's cramped in the erg room. It can get pretty hot in there. But yeah, I mean we definitely haven't worked. I mean, I certainly haven't been on the team with this number of people before, and it is difficult sometimes logistically. We had been having to do waves of ergs, but now we've got everyone together, which is great. But it certainly is a packed room when we all erg together. And then we were going to field 10 fours for Fours Head.
10.
Yeah, well, heavyweights and lightweights.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, so there are a lot of boats out there, which is brilliant, and it's just so exciting to see so many guys, wearing Cambridge colours and ready to race for Cambridge.
Just give us a rundown of the 4 you were scheduled to race in the Fours Head. Who were you sat with, and were you at 3 or bow in that crew?
I was at bow. So we had Matt Edge, who was bow seat of the 2023 blue boat. We had Luca, who was stroke seat of the 2023 blue boat and bow seat of the 2022 blue boat. And a guy called Gus John, who's an Aussie who did his undergrad at Durham. Really, really strong guy. He was at 2. And then we were coxed by Jake Intrater, who actually was with me at Princeton. When I was a senior, he had just come in as a freshman.
Oh, wow.
And so it's brilliant to have him back. Just so much fun to be on a team with him again.
It seems to me, just listening to you, and tell me if that's not the case, the recruitment in terms of Cambridge has been pretty impressive in terms of, both through the college system, from returners from, Goldie, and then guys coming in from American unis or wherever. I'm listening to you thinking, bloody hell, that's a pretty strong squad.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's we always will have a lot of athletes who are interested in coming, just because the draw of the boat race is still pretty huge, I think, for a lot of rowers. So it's really just a case of whether we can get guys from that interested phase into the actually applying and getting in phase. And some years we've struggled with it. This year I think we've really done pretty well and got a really strong group of guys. And it's I haven't seen such a kind of strong recruited group, I guess, in the past few years. So it's it's definitely cool to be a part of. But it's always difficult, and coming from the States, where basically you could get recruited to the university and and you'd just be in from December, whereas everyone else is still kind of applying and, you know, trying to get in with like a 5% acceptance rate for some of the Ivy Leagues. Whereas, you know, sports can just basically just get you in. It's completely different at Cambridge and at Oxford. And you very much have to, you know, get in through the strength of your academics. So it's a completely different challenge, really, for athletes coming in. But yeah, I mean, as long as the team and the boat race continues to be such a draw, I hopefully will always have some really interested rowers coming in from the colleges and from the States and from anywhere. And I know the coaches, Rob and Bill and Al, work really hard reaching out to people, like letting them know that Cambridge is very much an option.
That's really interesting. I was just looking at something that was written about you. I think it might have been in the 22 campaign. But it was basically about your leadership, and it kind of said something. You weren't directly quoted, but it was sort of paraphrased. I'm not known for leading from the front, or something like that. And I just wondered, because you know, were you asked to be president? Did you jump in for it? And how would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, well, I wanted to be president. I've wanted to be president for a few years, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think I just felt like I could really contribute something as a leader of the squad. You know, I've been rowing for a long time. I've been in a number of different programs. I feel like I have just a lot of experience as to what, you know, winning programs do well, what it takes, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I haven't ever felt like I am a kind of standout athlete. It's something that I feel like I've struggled with really over the years.
Really?
Yeah, I just naturally have never been like the strongest or, you know, the most mobile or the most technical, and I guess that has felt like a limiting factor for me. But I think, you know, part of being a good leader is kind of letting go of any of those kind of hang-ups and just really embracing what it is that makes you a good fit for leader. And I was voted to be the president of Cambridge, and I think it's, you know, for those aspects of myself that aren't necessarily just athletic performance, although I really feel like I've stepped on over the past few years in terms of what I'm able to do on the erg and on the water. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like I can bring a lot to the role, and I've really enjoyed doing it. Just in terms of developing a kind of culture for the guys that won't just last through this season, but that we can continue to build on over the next few years, and one that's kind of rooted in not only sort of being aggressive and being competitive, but also, you know, caring for each other and making this a space where guys feel like they can develop while being competitive. They feel like they are supported while they're, you know, trying to go for this highly selective race.
Could you give us an example of perhaps what would be one of the most rewarding things about your job that you've experienced so far?
That's a tricky question. It's pretty early in the season.
Yeah, I know.
No, I mean, I mean, honestly, I think it's just seeing guys loving the day to day, you know, coming down to training and really embracing what is, at the end of the day, a very difficult process, because we train really early, we do huge mileage, and it's super competitive and selective. So, you know, you're coming in stressed about your seat, stressed about, you know, where you are in the squad, how the coaches are looking at you, all of that stuff. but seeing guys come in and really just enjoy being a part of this team, enjoy, walking through the doors of Goldie and really revel in that. I think that's the kind of most rewarding thing. It's taking something which could be such a stressful and such a difficult thing and making it into something fun and something enjoyable and something really positive, that guys get a lot out of beyond just, potentially going and rowing in the boat race.
Yeah, I like that. I was really struck by what you were saying when you were describing yourself as an athlete. And, in terms of your palmares, Henley winner 2015, I think, junior bronze medalists, World Championships in Rotterdam in 2016. At Princeton, 2 blue boat wins. It's interesting. I'm just thinking some people will be surprised to hear you describe yourself in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've been lucky to row with some really, really fantastic rowers. I mean, in 2015, that Henley boat had guys that are now senior world champions: Freddie Davidson, David Ambler. Just amazing group of guys, and that junior world's 8 was really, really talented. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's tough to kind of take a step back and look at it objectively, but I just know in myself that there have been a lot of low points, I guess, for me in terms of how I feel about my own performance, and it's taken a lot to try and reckon with that, and to kind of keep coming back and trying to keep developing. I guess now I'm 14 years in, and there have been a lot of times where I have felt like my sort of potential in the sport, or my kind of I felt limited, I guess. Is what I'm saying. But I've tried really hard to kind of break through that, and I feel like over the past few years while I've been at Cambridge, I have become much, much better every year, which is really nice to feel this far into my career, I guess.
Yeah. Because what I was fascinated in terms of talking to you about low points, and rather than ask you what they were, I was really interested to know what is it that gets somebody like you through the low points, or who is it, or what set of circumstances helps you in that way?
I think, for me, just being on strong teams and being around really supportive friends has been the most important thing. And I've been really lucky to have made some just unbelievably good friends through this sport. And through those times where it has been really hard, I think just leaning on them, and really like remembering what it is about rowing that I love so much. And I think that a large part of it is just being on these teams with guys that I really love. I think that's been incredibly helpful. And that's part of why I have been sort of quite keen to keep developing that culture at Cambridge. Because I think it can be so helpful for guys that aren't, necessarily superstar athletes, who are really kind of grinding through some really difficult points in their career.
I mean, it was quite striking. I know that you rowed 3 or something in the 21 boat race, but last year or this year you were in the 6th seat, which is a lot of responsibility, I'm guessing. It's the 6th man that you look at and like, well, who's at stroke and who's at 6 might be the first thing that somebody might look at in an 8. They're quite big shoes to fill.
Yeah. I mean, the year before me, Tom George was in 6th. Blue boat. I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it was great to be at 6. I loved being up there in the stern, particularly behind Luca and Ollie. Ollie, who I rode with in the 21 race, and it was just really, I think we formed quite a tight unit there, and we could communicate quite well. It wasn't always smooth sailing. I think, we're all quite big characters. We all had a lot to say, but I think it was really good to have us up there, and we could communicate with Jasper a lot. I think it just really made sense for the crew. Everyone slotted into their position really, really well. And then, because Nick Mayhew was going to be at 6 and then he was moved to 2. I think it was brilliant having him in 2. Just set up the boat super well and just brought a lot of kind of experience and calmness, I think, to the bows. So it just sort of made sense. And I didn't sort of think too much about it in terms of kind of added pressure or anything. I just kind of was enjoying rowing anywhere in that boat. I sat in a variety of different seats over the course of the season, and it was always quite fun. So.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? How boats come together, because it was a relatively late change, I think, to put Luca in the stroke seat and you at 6. It's interesting how I don't know how much Ollie Boyne would have had an input into that, but how Rob Baker plays, or not plays it, but decides where he's going to put people and what he's going to do.
Yeah, and I mean, last season in particular there was a lot of movement around, and we actually had the boat formed in terms of the personnel who would actually make up the 8. From camp we had pretty much the 8. So that's a good few months of rowing with the same group of people, but we did mix it around a lot. But I think it was important. I mean, the order that we arrived at was definitely the best one. And I think, guys were kind of getting a bit ill and injured. I had an injury quite close to the race, so was moved back to the bows and then kind of moved back up. And I mean, there was movement in response to the fixtures as well. I think they taught us a lot. They showed us where our weaknesses were. And I think we needed that time to be able to settle on something. But I guess the great thing is, and I think it's a testament to how good Rob is as a coach, we could put something together in a final lineup quite close to the race and still get it moving really, really well. Get it to a place where it felt very, very polished. And it was the same in 21. Like, we had basically 2.5 weeks, I think, to get the blue boat together after we were allowed back on the water after COVID. But because of the strength of Rob's coaching, we were able to do that really effectively. So I think things can come together really quickly. It's just a case of who's at the helm and how effectively they can bring it together.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked already a couple of rows that you mentioned you were with in the St Paul's 8, Dave Ambler and Freddie Davison. Of course, now in that amazing 4 that's I think both of they're double world champions now, both of them, I think, because Dave subbed in 22, didn't he? So maybe you can talk a bit about them, and I'm interested, who stands out for you in terms of people that you've rowed with and why.
Yeah. So Freddie and Dave, absolute, standouts for sure. I guess we really, from day one, were kind of rowing together through St Paul's. We were in the same year, and we were in boats all the way up until we left school. And they were always just, fantastic oarsmen and really inspired the whole of the St Paul's program. I mean, when we came in, we were going out on Wednesday in the PE. It was a very, very different rowing team to what it is now. And I think a huge part of that was Freddie and Dave really kicking everything on. And Arthur Doyle, who was in the year above me as well, just fantastic rower, went on to captain Harvard and come to Cambridge in the year that got called off for the COVID. he was gonna stroke the 2020 blue boat. So it's a shame that But yeah, they really just changed things a lot at St. Paul's, and I think inspired all the guys who've now come through. Dow de Graaf, Calvin Tarzi, the current squad who just won ahead of the Charles by like 20 seconds, starting 70 something. Pretty amazing thing that I think Freddie and Dave and Arthur were kind of at the head of. And then in terms of other guys, I mean, I've rowed with some really amazing rowers over the years. Been very lucky to. Obviously, Tom George, Ollie Wynne Griffith, who were here the 22 season. Just such inspirational athletes, and was such a huge part of Cambridge that year, and actually continue to be a really huge part of our squad, which I think is just so great. They'll come back, they'll talk to the guys, they'll check in over the course of the season. I think Ollie is involved with the boat race company stuff. So just having them kind of in our corner ever since they were here has just been so great. And obviously rowing with them was like amazing. And then a few guys when I was at Princeton, a guy called Nick Mead, he just won US Rower of the Year. I remember in my freshman year, he was the captain of Princeton when I was a freshman, and we used to do these long distance pairs races every weekend in the lead up to Head of the Charles. And he one week was just like, "Hey Seb, do you want to do the pair with me this week?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds good." But that was pretty amazing. I still think about. I'm sure he doesn't ever. He never thought about that again, but I still think about that.
Yeah.
And he's just such a wonderful guy. Like, just the most nice, chill, down to earth guy, but an absolutely unbelievable athlete. The only guy I can remember that could rival Tom George on the ergs, because they were, Tom was also at Princeton.
Yeah.
It would often be between Nick and Tom as to who would win the hard ergs.
Oh, he was that strong, was he?
Yeah, really, really strong. And then one of my closest friends, David Buick Copley, rode with him quite a lot over the years. He's now at Caversham, hoping to make the Olympic team. And a ton of guys over the years that I've just been really, really lucky to be in boats with. Really inspirational.
Is there anyone rowers that have surprised you, either in terms of what they're capable of, or coming up from somewhere, or?
Yeah, I mean, the one that stands out to me is Luca, who learned to row at the Lee, was a sculler through juniors, went to Coop, and came to Cambridge with no experience of sweep rowing. In 21 was in the spare pair, and then basically over the course of a few months in the 2022 season went from the kind of fresher who had very little sweep experience to a guy who was rowing. He rowed with Tom and Ollie and George Finlayson, who was an amazing rower as well, came in from Cal. For that season. He was bow seat of their 4 at Fours Head, and it was just unbelievable to see that progression over such a short space of time. And since then he's won the under-23 Worlds in the 8, and it's just such a great athlete now, and such a big part of the team. So I think he's definitely the one where I just look at that and it's just awe-inspiring, really. As to what he did in such a short space of time.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that. Talking about guys that rode last year, as Luca did, how long does the glow of a victory in the boat race last at the boat club?
I don't know, like not very long.
Oh, really?
I think it. I mean, from a personal sort of standpoint, it's a very interesting thing, because you spend so long chasing that goal, such an intense season, and then you have the one thing, and you don't know how it's going to go. You either win it or you lose it, and you win it, and you have maybe a couple of hours of absolute elation, and then the kind of reality of it starts to sink in, and it's like, well, okay, we did it. And it's like, what now? And for the club, it's you start looking forward, because the boat races, it happens every year, and the objective obviously is to win your season, but then once that's done, you have to look ahead. And I think for us who have come back, you do kind of quite quickly start looking ahead. And yeah, I mean, it's about having an impact that lasts years. It's not necessarily just about the race that you're doing then and there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it has to kind of be like that. You certainly can't rest on your laurels. Obviously, you need time to celebrate the achievement. And I think in the 23 set of races, that was a pretty special thing for the club, getting the clean sweep. That was pretty fantastic. But things kind of settle back down. You look towards GB trials. That's kind of the first thing that happens after the races, I think. And then there's Bucks and Henley beyond that, and yeah, kind of the ball keeps rolling. Yeah.
We talked about Rob Baker as a coach, and we haven't mentioned Bobby Thatcher at St Paul's. I just wonder how much you think. I mean, Bobby's known for being an incredible coach. Not just in terms of motivator of the guys that he coaches, but in terms of the technique and his understanding of the technique. How similar the technique is for the St Paul's cruise, the one you rode in, and subsequent cruise, and the Cambridge cruise coached by Rob Baker?
I think there is a lot of stuff that has been carried over. I think Bobby was really influenced a lot by Harry Mahon, who also coached at Cambridge for a period. And a lot of that style is still stuff that we talk about today at Cambridge. And obviously Donald Leggett as well. Coached at both. So when I was J17, I think he started coaching at St Paul's, and he was a really, really big part of our cruise in 2015 and 2016. And he's still a big part of rowing at Cambridge as well. So there are a lot of kind of holdovers, I guess. But I mean, I guess in terms of the actual technical stuff, it's all just basically about trying to be as effective as possible and rowing as long as possible. There are kind of a few details I think that the clubs do differently. And I think actually when Ollie was at Cambridge, because he was such a kind of pivotal figure as a rower, and he was so often in the stroke seat, Ollie Parish, we ended up doing things quite similarly to some of those St Paul's. We had quite a lot of time around the back end. That was kind of the main thing, I think, really. Just that kind of rhythm around the back was quite similar to how the 2018 St Paul's crew rode. But in general, I think we change and adapt over time as well, depending on the athletes that we have. And this year we're kind of thinking about things a little bit differently. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some similarities, but there are also some differences as well.
Yeah. Are you using things when you go rowing? Like, how often do you use telemetry, and do you have those little screens you can see your curves on and things like that? And how do the coaches utilize that? And how does that work for you?
We use telemetry pretty much all the time. Have done for. Well, this is probably the year where we're using telemetry most. It's definitely been quite a big part of the system, I guess, at Cambridge over the past few years. But this year we're putting more into it, I guess. We have more telemetry for more boats. Everyone's got a screen, and basically we're just using it as a tool to make sure that we're producing the amount of power that we should be producing. So we're kind of holding people to a standard out on the water, like you would, I guess, on an ergo, making sure that like the power output is right, because I think that, you know, that's a very important part of making a boat go fast, is making sure that everyone is producing the amount of power that they should, and then making sure that the curves are matching up, the lengths are matching up, people are being effective. The telemetry can measure your effective length within your whole stroke, so it measures the length of your stroke, and then it can measure how much slip there is at either end. So that can be a really, really powerful tool, minimizing slip while maximizing length and basically improving your overall effective length. That's really, really powerful. And using the curves to make sure that everyone's kind of matching up their stroke profile can really transform the crew. And we did it a lot. It's actually part of the reason why I think the 2021 crew came together so well. We just used telemetry a lot, and we were like, right, we've got to make sure that we're applying X amount of force at this point in the stroke together off the front end. And it's like that just really, like, you know, because you can see it. You can see it in a way that I guess, you know, you wouldn't be able to if you didn't have the thing right in front of you. It's so tangible. It's, you know, it's right there, and you can see every stroke what you do that will like affect that. So you can kind of experiment with it and latch on to certain things, and it allows making technical changes to sort of come much more consistently, I think. Yeah. So I think it's a really powerful tool. I'm glad that we're using it to the level that we are now. I think it's going to be a really big thing for us over the course of this season.
Yeah, it was interesting because as you were talking, I've never used telemetry in the boat with the screen as such, but I was thinking, oh, that must make it sort of quite challenging or maybe complicated for the rowers. But then I thought, from what you're saying, because you're getting that instant feedback, maybe it doesn't make it maybe it makes it easier for them.
Yeah, no, I think you're not presented with anything like particularly overwhelming. You basically have the curve, you have your number for your watts, and you have your length out front and your length around the back. So it's kind of 4 data points, I guess, that you're looking at. And it's really, you can really get a sense of just how much those things can change depending on what you're doing. So once you kind of get in the rhythm of it and figure out like how, you know, what you're doing with your body is related to what's happening on the screen, it really is quite intuitive, I think. And it helps a lot. It helps a ton. But I think, you know, making technical changes in rowing is such a difficult thing to do when you already have however million strokes under your belt rowing in a certain way, right? Like, you know, your body is so used to rowing in the way that you row over, you know, years, and then a coach kind of wants you to make a certain change. It's like you have to try and teach your body to do something that it's really doesn't want to do, it's not used to doing. But then being able to see it, I think, just brings such a new level of understanding and just feasibility, I guess, to make that change.
We haven't talked ergs much, if at all, and I know Tom George famously broke that world record for 5K. And I know the 5K is a pretty key part of boat race, if not training, testing. How significant erg scores in terms of crew selection and things like that at Cambridge?
I wouldn't say particularly. I think the ergs are a really useful tool, particularly the testing, just to, you know, show you where you are relative to other people. But ultimately, what Rob wants are guys who are going to move the boat. And I think interestingly, what we've seen with the telemetry is it's not necessarily a huge correlation as to what you can do on an erg versus what you're able to output on the water.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's you have some guys who really, are quite far behind, I guess, on the erg. And I think last year we just had a crew that was not very big on the erg at all, but they are able to do things on the water in terms of generating power output, length, moving the boat that you just wouldn't have thought, basically, based on their erg test results. So I think, they're an important thing. It, helps guys be competitive. You lay down sort of markers, I guess, for the season, shows progression. But we don't select boats based on ergs. Though if you're, PBing massively and going really, really fast on a 5K, it definitely shows something. And the coaches will take it into account, I guess, as a kind of data point in the ongoing picture of athletes that they're building up over the course of the season.
Yeah. You have concept twos, don't you, at CUBC?
Yeah, we have concept twos we generally use for hard ergos, and then RP3s we use for
I was going to say, actually, because I was going to ask you about the concept two and RP3, because the Dutch team, I know, use them exclusively. And they're now spreading, because the Dutch team use them, they're now spreading more through the university clubs. What's your take on the two ergs?
I think the way that we do it, I think, is good. The RP is just a lot closer to actual rowing, and the kind of feedback it gives you in terms of the curve, the length, that stuff is really, really good. It gives you a lot more data, basically, than a concept. And it's a bit easier on the joints in the back, I think. When you're doing long mileage, the RP is a really good tool. And then using the C2 for hard ergs and for testing allows us to kind of basically see where we are relative to the wider rowing community. Because doing a 5K on an RP3 just isn't really the same as doing it on a C2. Like, you pull 15:30 on an RP3 and it's like, okay, brilliant, but it's like, what would you be on a C2? You kind of know where other people, on the senior team or wherever would be on a C2. So it's I think using the C2 as a kind of benchmark sort of standard thing makes sense. But then the RP is just such a great training tool, really, really good training tool.
How I'm thinking about the race. You've sat on the start of the boat race several times. How are you with nerves and dealing with them?
I think I'm all right. I don't know. I tend to get very nervous kind of further out, and then as I get towards the race, I kind of enter a more like calm state of acceptance, I guess. It's like, I can't do anything other than to just do the race, so it's when the day comes, definitely this year I really tried actively to enjoy the week leading up to it, and then the day itself, because it's such a unique and amazing event for a rower. It's just, there's nothing really like it, and I really just wanted to take it all in as much as I could, and so I think that definitely helped. Although, up on the start line, or I guess really when you boat and then you go through Putney Bridge and you're up sort of beyond Putney Bridge warming up and you're kind of away from all the crowds, that's where it's worse. That's when you're just like, wow, this is this is really happening. But yeah, it can be stressful, but it's just, it's such an amazing thing to do. It's
You said you live with Jasper Parish, who of course steered that blinder of a race this year in the boat race. Was that his magnum opus? Has he done with Coxin now?
I think so. Jasper was always a bit big for a Cox. I think he's quite tall. He's
Yeah,
6 foot, and he was really having to basically starve himself to be at the weight for the race. So it was pretty hard for him, I think. So I think he's quite enjoying being away from it and sort of living life as
yeah,
a kind of um, normal person for a bit. I don't know if I mean, he might come back to it. I'm sure he misses it.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think for now he's just really enjoying sort of being at Cambridge and yeah, just making the most of it.
yeah. As a president, what input, if any, do you get into crew selection?
Basically none. I mean, Rob. I mean, the relationship between the coach and the president is fairly open. In that Rob will communicate a lot with me, in terms of what he's thinking and where he sees the squad and like what he's planning and how it's all going to work. But in terms of the president being able to influence the coach's decisions, I mean, it's you have to defer. Basically, it's
Mm,
I would not at all trust myself to make a decision over Rob. And ultimately, the coach is the one who should select the boats. I think back in the day, the president used to do everything basically. Um, in the history of the boat race,
yeah,
the president of either squad would build the squads, and then they'd hire sort of interim coaches, and they would and they'd select their boats. But nowadays, it's very much the head coach
yeah.
is the one who's making those decisions.
Um,
Um,
I don't want to get you talking about Oxford too much, but I don't really know too much about the Oxford squad and who's in it generally because it's not up on the website. What do you know about the Oxford squad?
um, I know they have some really good guys this year. They have uh, some guys from the States. They have Harry Glenister from
Oh
who
yeah,
was sort of GB senior team. Lenny Jenkins, who was Yale varsity. They have some guys from Cal. They don't have as many returners as us, but they have some good returners. So I think they're in a good place. They're looking fairly strong.
mm,
Um, but Oxford always look quite strong. I think they
yeah,
always have a really strong group of rowers. So it's ultimately it's what happens over there. I don't really
yeah,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
too much. But yeah, I think they'll be strong on paper for sure.
Um, and just talk us through in terms of the chronology. So I think the the first big thing or the next big thing is the president's challenge,
Yes, on
which
the
is a
16th.
kind of a bit of a publicity kickstarter,
Mm,
where you get to stand opposite your dark blue um,
indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
president and listen to him challenge you.
Yeah. That'll be
Which
fun.
yeah, which I guess is fun. And then the next big thing after that is trial eights.
Yeah. Trilates in sort of mid-December. That's kind of the culmination of our term, I suppose, and it's always just a fantastic race. Great opportunity to be out on the course. Probably really the best single piece that we do in terms of preparation for the boat race in the whole season. Better
Mm,
than the fixtures, probably just because it's a full battle over the course.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
How long do you get in each boat before that race?
quite a while. So um, we'll probably settle into our lineups over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll have a good few weeks running to the race. So it's you get the eights really to a quite high standard, which I think is
Yeah,
important, because you want the race to be as close to a kind of boat race as possible. You want the crews to be moving as well as possible, just
Mm.
so you can have a really close race and you can experience what it's like to be in a dogfight all the way down the course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you go on camp in New Year at all?
Yep. We go at the start of January for about 10 days. I think we're going to a Viz this year in
Oh, lovely.
Portugal.
Yeah,
Yeah. But we've been elsewhere before, and that's always just a great opportunity to sort of do some more selection and to start to get a picture of what the eights are going to look like,
yeah.
and do pieces. Just get some really good training in.
And when do you get any clarity about the match racing and who you're going up against in those sort of fixtures before the boat race?
I'm not entirely sure. I think those sort of conversations are happening right now. I mean, we tend to always race Leander and Brooks.
Yeah,
So I imagine this year it will be the same, or next year, I suppose. And then that final fixture, for the past couple of years, we've raced the Dutch, which has been really good. And last year, it was a really great race,
yeah.
where we won the first piece, and then they really turned it on for the second piece and beat us. And they're also just lovely guys that we went out to dinner with the night before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was just really nice. So hopefully they come back, and we can race the Dutch again. But yeah, I think there's scope for changing things up every season. It really depends on who's interested in racing and who's available, I suppose.
Mm. Outside of rowing, I know there is a life outside of rowing. And you've been talking about Jasper experiencing that. You're doing quite a cool. Is it? Are you doing a PhD or
Yeah,
in
PhD.
what does? Where does that take you? It's film studies, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's the academic study of film. There's no sort of practical component to it. It's basically like art history, art criticism, art theory, but for film, which is fun, which is really interesting and cool. And it's something that I've been interested in since undergrad. By the end of my time at Princeton, I was starting to write about film as part of my English degree, and that kind of led me to the master's in film studies here, and then I was really loving that, and so I wanted to keep going with the PhD. And beyond Cambridge, I don't really know. I mean, it's maybe working at a university as a professor. I think that could be pretty cool. I'd love to go back out to the States at some point. So
Yeah.
maybe trying to find a job at a US university on the West Coast. That'd be pretty. That'd be all right. But yeah, right now I'm just really enjoying the research and staying part of the Cambridge scene is
Yeah.
pretty special. Yeah.
Do you have a favourite film?
I do, but I feel like it might be too lowbrow.
Oh no, go on.
It's Wedding Crashers. Wedding Crashers is my favorite film.
Oh wow, how come?
I don't know. I just really love that movie.
Yeah,
It's like the only movie where I really feel like I could just watch it on repeat, just like all the time, and I wouldn't get tired of it. I don't really know why. It just really it hits the sweet spot for me. Wedding
yeah.
Crashers. I should really write
Oh,
my PhD on Wedding Crashers. I think that would probably be more interesting. But
yeah. So it strikes me there is a rowing film coming out after Christmas. Can
yeah.
you envisage a squad outing to the cinema?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think there are guys, maybe not on the men's team, but on the women's. There's like a Cox on the women's team I know who did do some filming for the boys in the boat. I think he's like an extra for one of the countries at the Olympics. He's like coxing one of them. So, and there are other guys who I know. Jack Gosden Kay, I think, who's a Leander rower. He's
Yeah.
rowing for the Germans in it. So that'll be interesting to see some familiar faces in that. But yeah, for sure, we'll get all the guys out to the cinema. maybe we'll do a screening in the boathouse. That'd be quite fun.
Yeah, that would be cool, actually. Or even get an invitation to the premiere. I don't know if there's a UK premiere, but be
That'd
good
be cool.
publicity. Get the boat race cruise there.
Yeah, I mean that'd be great. I don't know how we go about doing that, but yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ask Rob to get on it.
Okay, I'm not sure Rob is the man to ask really, but yeah, fair enough. I'll ask him tomorrow morning.
So Seb, we've been talking for an hour. It's been fantastic. Is there anything that you would have liked to have said, or that I could have asked you that we haven't talked about?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's been a really great chat.
I've really enjoyed it.
Always happy to talk about Cambridge. It's a pretty special place, and really excited about the season to come.
Yeah, I get that sense. So we'll end the live part of this interview now. Thanks everyone for tuning in and watching. It's been great to have so many of you on, listening to Seb talk with such eloquence about his role at Cambridge and the CUB squad. And thanks very much, Seb.
Thanks, Martin.